Implicit factors underlying political orientation. If political ideology is but one manifestation of larger internal forces pertinent to everything from cleaning supplies in the bedroom to ice cream consumption, are there psychological, affective, cognitive, and visceral ways in which leftists and rightists tend to differ? This question has produced deeply fascinating findings. I'll try to corral them into some categories. Intelligence. Oh, what the hell? Let's begin with something inflammatory. Starting with Theodor Adorno in the 1950s, people have suggested that lower intelligence predicts adherence to conservative ideology. Some, but not all studies since then have supported this conclusion. More consistent has been a link between lower intelligence and a subtype of conservatism, namely right-wing authoritarianism, RWA, a fondness for hierarchy. One particularly thorough demonstration of this involved more than 15,000 subjects in the UK and United States. Importantly, the links among low IQ, RWA, and intergroup prejudice were there after controlling for education and socioeconomic status. The standard, convincing explanation for the link is that RWA provides simple answers, ideal for people with poor abstract reasoning skills. Intellectual style. This literature has two broad themes. One is that rightists are relatively uncomfortable intellectually with ambiguity. This is covered below. The other is that leftists, think harder, have a greater capacity for what the political scientist Philip Tetlock of the University of Pennsylvania calls integrative complexity. In one study, conservatives and liberals, when asked about the causes of poverty, both tended toward personal attributions. They're poor because they're lazy. But only if they had to make snap judgments. Give people more time, and liberals shifted toward situational explanations. Wait, things are stacked against the poor. In other words, conservatives start gut and stay gut. Liberals go from gut to head. This differing attributional style extends way beyond politics. Tell liberals or conservatives about a guy who trips over someone's feet while learning a dance, ask for a snap assessment, and everyone does personal attribution. The guy's clumsy. It's only with time that the liberals go situational. Maybe the dance is really difficult. Obviously, this dichotomy isn't perfect. Rightists did personal attribution for Lewinsky-gate, Bill Clinton's rotten, while leftists did situational. It's a vast right-wing conspiracy. And things ran the opposite with Nixon and Watergate. However, they are pretty reliable. Why the difference? Liberals and conservatives are equally capable of thinking past gut personal attributions to subtler situational ones. When asked to do so, both are equally adept at dispassionately presenting the viewpoints of the opposite camp. It's that liberals are more motivated to push towards situational explanations. Why? Some have suggested it's a greater respect for thinking, which readily becomes an unhelpful tautology. Linda Skitka of the University of Illinois emphasizes how the personal attributions of snap judgments readily feel dissonant to liberals, at odds with their principles. Thus they are motivated to think their way to a more consonant view. In contrast, even with more time, conservatives don't become more situational, because there's no dissonance. While logical, this just turfs us to asking where the liberal ideology causing the dissonance comes from in the first place. As we'll see, it comes from factors having little to do with cognitive style. These findings suggest that it's easier to make a liberal think like a conservative than the other way around. Or, stated in a familiar way, increasing cognitive load should make people more conservative. This is precisely the case. The time pressure of snap judgments is a version of increased cognitive load. Likewise, people become more conservative when tired, in pain or distracted with a cognitive task, or when blood alcohol levels rise. Recall from Chapter 3 that willpower takes metabolic power, thanks to the glucose demands of the frontal cortex. This was the finding that when people are hungry, they become less generous in economic games. A real-world example of this is startling. In a study of more than 1,100 judicial rulings, prisoners were granted parole at about a 60% rate when judges had recently eaten, and at essentially a 0% rate just before judges ate. Note also the overall decline over the course of a tiring day. Justice may be blind, but she's sure sensitive to her stomach gurgling. Moral cognition. Another minefield. Surprise, people at both ends of the political spectrum accuse the other side of impoverished moral thought. One direction of this is seemingly bolstered by Chapter 7's Kohlberg Stages of Moral Development. Liberals, steeped in civil disobedience, tend to be at a higher Kohlberg stage than are conservatives, with their fondness for law and order. Are rightists less intellectually capable of reasoning at a more advanced Kohlberg stage, or are they less motivated to do so? Seemingly the latter. Rightists and leftists are equally capable of presenting the other's perspective. Jonathan Haidt of NYU provides a very different view. He identifies 6 foundations of morality: care versus harm, fairness versus cheating, liberty versus oppression, loyalty versus betrayal, authority versus subversion, sanctity versus degradation. Both experimental and real-world data show that liberals preferentially value the first 3 goals, namely care, fairness, and liberty, and, showing an overlap with Kohlbergian formulations, undervaluing loyalty, authority, and sanctity is in many ways synonymous with post-conventional thinking. In contrast, conservatives heavily value loyalty, authority, and sanctity. Obviously, this is a big difference. Is it okay to criticize your group to outsiders? Rightists? No, that's disloyal. Leftists? Yes, if justified. Should you ever disobey a law? Rightists? No, that undermines authority. Leftists? Of course, if it's a bad law. Is it okay to burn the flag? Rightists? Never, it's sacred. Leftists? Come on, it's a piece of cloth. These differing emphases explain a lot. For example, the classical liberal view is that everyone has equal rights to happiness. Rightists instead discount fairness in favor of expedient authority, generating the classical conservative view that some socioeconomic inequality is a tolerable price for things running smoothly. What does it mean that, in Haidt's view, conservatives count up 6 moral foundations on their toes and liberals only 3? Here is where internecine sniping starts. Conservatives embrace Haidt's characterization of liberals as being morally impoverished, with half their moral foundations atrophied. The opposite interpretation, espoused by Jost and Joshua Green of Harvard, is that liberals have more refined moral foundations, having jettisoned the less important, more historically damaging ones that conservatives perseverate on. In effect, liberals count from 1 to 3, while conservatives really only count 4 to 6. Why are conservatives more concerned with binding foundations like loyalty, authority, and sanctity, often stepping stones to right-wing authoritarianism and social dominance orientation? This segues to the next section.